Welcome. Thanks for looking in. Today I'd like to share another bit of San Francisco's history that I've tried to include on my San Francisco and Northwestern Pacific layout. Later on in the video, I'll share some N-scale railroading that took place very close to this location by the Western Pacific Railroad, which indeed had trackage in San Francisco, even though all of its traffic came across the bay on a car float operation from Oakland. We are looking at Seal Stadium, which sat at 16th and Bryant Streets. Opened in 1931, it was simultaneously the home to two Pacific Coast League teams, the San Francisco Seals and the Mission Reds. The Missions, or the Reds, would later move to Los Angeles and become the Hollywood Stars. The Seals would continue to play at 16th and Bryant until 1957, when they won the Pacific Coast League title for the 14th time in their final year at Seal Stadium. Situated on a rise above San Francisco's Mission District, on the western shoulder of Potrero Hill, it was a great setting. While fog is quite the norm for San Francisco during the summer, the Mission would always enjoy a bit better weather, as the fog would burn off before it got to the eastern side of town. As the old saying goes, it's always sunny in the Mission. Fans could take the 22 Fillmore bus and get off right at the front door of the stadium. Originally built with a capacity for 16,000 fans, later increased to 18,500 in 1946, it was a compact, intimate park with no overhang, allowing fans to enjoy the city's mild weather. If someone out there thought they caught a glimpse of the great Joltin' Joe DiMaggio tipping his hat to the crowd as he crossed home plate wearing a Seals uniform, well, you did. In fact, Joe and his brothers, Vince and Tom, all played for the Seals before their major league years. Indeed, it was brother Vince who got Joe a tryout for the Seals team. With Seal Stadium situated directly across the street from three breweries, it certainly showed how beer and baseball went together perfectly. The Theodore Ham Company would buy the old Rainier Brewery that sat just behind home plate. They promptly erected the greatest billboard ever to be seen in San Francisco. The famous Ham's beer glass could be seen from many parts of the city. At night, when it was all lit up, it presented the most amazing show. The glass would fill up until it reached the top of the glass and actually foam over its rim, only to then slowly empty out and start all over again. The San Francisco Seals would vacate Seals Stadium in 1957 because in 1958, Willie Mays and the New York Giants would come west to San Francisco, giving the city its own major league club. The Giants would play the 1958 and 59 seasons at Seals Stadium as a new ballpark was being constructed out by the bay at Candlestick Park. Seats were added out in left field to increase its capacity to 22,900 for those two seasons. The fans flocked to come out to see their new major league team in San Francisco. Quite an exciting time, 1958. And now it's opening day. It's April 15th, 1958. And here's the first pitch of the first major league ball game in San Francisco. The Giants are facing their new arch rivals, the Los Angeles Dodgers, who have also just come out west from Brooklyn that year. The Giants would go on to win the game, beating Don Drysdale and the Dodgers 8-0. Orlando Cepeda would hit his first career homer that day. What an opening. In their last game at Seal Stadium, the Giants would lose to the Dodgers 8-2 in front of 22,923 on September 20th, 1959. With a new ballpark waiting out at Candlestick, Seal Stadium would go away. I say go away because, though the stadium would be completely torn down, the lights and their tall standards, as well as the stadium seats, would be disassembled and taken north to Tacoma, Washington, where they'd be reinstalled in Tacoma's new Cheney Stadium, where they remain to this day. Seals Stadium met the wrecking ball in November of 1959, less than 3 decades from its original construction. One of the original contractors who built the stadium in 1931 was heard to say, "It's a shame, just a damn shame." Having modeled the somewhat likeness of Ham's Brewery on my layout, it was always my wish to model its across-the-street neighbor, Seals Stadium, and bring it back to life. But as you can see, the room on the layout was rather limited. But my neighbor Mike, also a San Francisco native himself, came by one day and said, "You know, you really need to put the ballpark in there." Well, that was it. I had to figure out a way to include it, but it would have to go behind the Baker and Hamilton building somehow. And with only 5 inches of space between that building and the backdrop, plus the fact that 2 tracks, the beginning and end of a balloon track that went through a closet, that met right there behind the building, it was going to be a bit of a challenge. Of course, modeling the entire stadium would be impossible, but I thought I might be able to model at least part of it. So I did some preliminary studying, if you will, to see what I might do. I figured I just might be able to show the third base left field side of the park that faced downtown. So off I went, cutting up some styrene. After a couple of mock-ups, I finally positioned my styrene ballpark into the scene, just so I could figure out what next. Seal Stadium sat upon the westernmost part of Potrero Hill. Over the years, much of this part of the hill had been graded and leveled off. But behind the stadium, or at least where it used to be, one can still see part of the natural hill that has been excavated away. These are pictures along Alameda Street, just behind where the ballpark was. Now, modeling this part of the hill was going to work out well for me for 2 reasons. One, I wanted to show off a rather unique rock, serpentine, of which there is a lot of it present in this location. Serpentine is a pretty blue-green rock that also happens to be California's state rock. And San Francisco has quite a lot of it. I would know, as in my career with a utility here, I dug into a bunch of it. But besides being our state rock, it's also a natural occurring form of asbestos. Needless to say, digging into it and hauling it away required many special procedures dealing with such a hazardous material. But to model it, to show off its beauty, and no longer having to worry about its potential hazard, it was just something a retired ditch digger like me could appreciate. Now, the second reason modeling this hill would help me was simple. I needed a foundation to extend down to grade right at the edge of the ballpark. And although I did have to provide clearance for my tracks below, I think it worked out well. And since I was in the neighborhood, I thought I'd also include the former Hostess Cake Bakery that was directly behind the stadium on Bryant Street, now occupied as a U-Haul storage facility. Its tower still stands. Looking up Bryant Street, that light yellow building beyond was the 16th and Bryant corner of Seal Stadium. Earlier, I promised to show you some Western Pacific trackage on my layout, but I thought I'd try and bring this into some kind of orientation of where we're talking about here. In this picture, you're looking south down Western Pacific's main line, if you will, and looking directly at Potrero Hill, where this line went under and through a 1,625-foot tunnel to reach the southeastern portion of its line and hook up with the car float operation that brought the traffic into town. So that's where we are here, and we'll move along. But I thought it'd be interesting to show you this. Now here, you're looking down the same right-of-way, and of course the Western Pacific is no more, but just a couple of shots to give you some feeling of how the railroad ran through this part of town. I thought it was interesting, but this was actually Western Pacific's main line. Of course, I don't think it went through that building, but this is down below the Central Freeway and 101 connection in the city. Now, this line went under this freeway even after it was built, and it crossed on Division Street here, but it crossed the Southern Pacific's former main line, which is just down the way and to the left. But here are just some street shots of what you can see remaining in the pavement that haven't been paved over. Various buildings that kind of inspired us to add some of those things into the layout. So we'll just keep looking here, but now at the top of the street here, just beyond all of that, would Seal Stadium would be just beyond all that. This is actually looking up Alameda Street, looking down the other way. So it was pretty close to Seal Stadium, just what's remaining. The WP was a little railroad in the town here, but it did have quite a few customers. And again, if you look up, you'll see just beyond that building in front of you would have been Seal Stadium, just another half a block away. This is Southern Pacific trackage under the Central Freeway, and this is also a piece of SP trackage crossing the WP. The SP swung up here to various buildings as well, but for the most part, the WP dominated this little area of town. This is the Santa Fe down on Illinois Street, and that I think you'll see a little bit later on as you continue watching here. So, with that, sit back and enjoy a little bit of the action. Here we see Western Pacific's SW9, number 605, starting to spot cars in the area. So I'll quit talking and let you just enjoy some of this action. So, enjoy. Having worked for the gas company here, I had to include the Goodman Gas Main Stopper Company. Their sign illustrates just one of their various means of stopping off low-pressure gas mains. There aren't many, if any, low-pressure systems left anymore. So, I suppose it was good I retired when I did. Things of the past, I guess. And I guess I'm one of them. So, thanks for looking back in time with me, and grab another bag of peanuts.